Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Blue Mountain Customer Boost on Assets. My name is Savannah, and I'm on the marketing team here at Blue Mountain. And I have Maui here who's going to be leading today's training. We do see a lot of people still just filling out their audio to get set up here. So we're going to just give 1 to 2 more minutes, and then we're going to get started with the training. All right, I believe everyone's pretty settled here with the audio, and if not, we're just going to go through a few slides here before we get started and dive into the actual training. But for those of you who just joined us, I want to say welcome. My name is Savannah, and I'm on the marketing team here at Blue Mountain. And today's Blue Mountain Customer Boost is going to be around assets in Blue Mountain RAM. And I have Maui here who's going to be leading today's training. Maui, I don't know if you want to say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Before he gets started, I do just have some basic slides that we want to go through in the beginning that are just going to cover some different customer events that we have going on this month and just throughout the year. So if you can click to the next slide. Okay, so many of you have attended one of our monthly events, which is either the Customer Lab or the Boost. Today being the Boost, this one is more of a training session that focuses on different topics of Blue Mountain RAM and are really meant to design, to really enhance users' knowledge of the software. The other event that we have is our Customer Lab, which is more of an open forum or discussion where we cover different features in Blue Mountain RAM, but then we open it up for really interactive questions to hear questions that you have maybe for Blue Mountain or for other customers about how they're using the software. And I want to invite everyone to join us to our next lab, which is going to be on June 3rd, and it's going to be covering non-conformance records, or NCRs. The links to register for both the lab and Boost can be found in the registration. They are going to be found in the chat window. You can feel free to share those registration links with anyone in your organization who may also like to attend. Next slide, please. The next thing I want to talk about is our Blue Mountain Summit. This year, we're going to be hosting it virtually, and I know we've already been talking to a few customers who are looking to present this year, which we're very excited about. We're going to be hosting it on 2 different afternoons, the afternoon of Tuesday, September 22nd, and then also Wednesday, September 23rd. Right now, we do have registration open, and there's some additional information that can be found at thebluemountainsummit.com. I also posted the URL to that in the chat window as well. And then, as I said, we've been working with some customers who are looking to present, but we're also looking for more. So if you have any ideas on speaking, or if you'd like to speak but not sure what you'd like to talk about, either way, please either email marketing and let us know, or you can fill out the proposal form, which is also found in the chat window. But either way, I just want to invite everyone to think about coming to our Blue Mountain Summit this year. All right, next slide. And finally, we're just going to cover how you can participate in today's training. And so since this is not the lab, we're not going to be taking questions throughout the call, but we still want it to be very interactive and beneficial to you as a training session. And so throughout, you can either raise your hand or type your question in the questions panel. And then we're going to save everything until after the training, but then we'll take all the questions live. And we actually have a few other Blue Mountain personnel here on the line too, who will be helping out with questions. And so again, we're going to save them all until the end, but you can either raise your hand or type your question at any point throughout the training, and then we'll get to it. All right, and then so now I'm going to pass it over to Maui.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yep, we
Okay,
can hear you.
so hello everyone. My name is Maui Dong. I am a software implementation analyst here at Blue Mountain. Today we're going to talk about asset records in Blue Mountain RAM. As you can see on our first page, you have the action item as well as the queries from the assets in our R30 software right now. So just going into the basic goals and learning objectives for this customer boost, we're going to talk about the assets within Blue Mountain RAM. So from previous slides, we talked about how we can see it from the as an action item and as a query, but what we're trying to find out for this boost is that we're going to understand what the asset records in Blue Mountain are used for and how they can be applied. So what is an asset record? Blue Mountain has it defined as a core record type in Blue Mountain RAM that is used to track information on various instruments, either large or small. You can use it to track impact on production line, to maintaining the building in any way. Asset records also allow for work execution to track preventive maintenance, calibration, and validation activities on a scheduled or on-demand basis. And the uses for asset records. There are actually a lot of uses for them, but the most important would be maintaining the history of work on these assets for potential audits in the future. Having the full history available allows you to go back for any preventative maintenance and verification. Other uses include tracking cost of ownership, can field data or field data type to reporting possible to the different reporting within the software based on asset records. Asset records can also be used to report on trends, tracking calibration trends, problem instruments, or interval analysis type of reporting. It can be done by the use of reporting in asset records. It also can be used for tracking operational ranges, in addition to the one operating range to use with things like measurement data template with calibration. But asset records is really the place to track that information. And in addition, there's also other various fields available for the assets, such as the model number, the serial number, manufacturer, location, and owner of the assets. So there's going to be 4 types of asset records that we're going to cover today. Within the software, there's actually 5. The last one is personnel, but because of how different personnel is from the rest of these 4, we're not going to dive into personnel today. We're only going to be talking about equipment, system, loop, and location. So with equipment, now that you guys have a basic understanding of what asset records are, the equipment record is really the standalone asset within the Blue Mountain RAM system, and they can be classified as a calibration standard. A lot of your pipettes to your centrifuges can be classified as equipment. And then the second asset record we have is the system record. This is for more complex and larger assets. So for example, this is more of a child and parent relationship, where if you have a system set up, you can either have equipment or another system listed as a child. And the good thing about the system record is that all the child and system under the initial parent record, once the work is completed with the child, either equipment or system, all of that information gets pushed back to the parent system. So you can technically, if you have 4 or 5 child systems or equipments under one parent system, you can view all of that information by just viewing the parent system. You don't have to go into each individual child system. And the last two asset types that we're going to cover are loop and location. So loop, this type of asset record is really used for to group assets together for a singular activity. This is most commonly referred to as a calibration loop within our customer base. So any loop member, which are equipment records, can have one work record associated to them throughout the loop parent. And for this relationship, it's not purely a parent-child relationship. It's more of a linear relationship where the loop record is able to have one work record that is associated with all loop members at once. And the final asset type that we have is location. This particular asset type is used to track work and data against a physical room or building. Allows for tracking of things like room cleaning, GXP compliant rooms, and other various facilities work, such as like changing a light bulb and stuff like that. Location asset record can also be tied to location hierarchy, which refers to the location field on the asset records for tracking. But it's treated as two separate items, but it can be tied together. So before we jump into the questions, I'm actually going to run a quick demo with the R3 software to kind of show you guys how you guys would create an asset and what each of the type of asset records are. So just to start off, if when you log on, you'll see my workspace, and right here you can set my workspace to display all assets, and then based on the icons here, you can tell which one is which. And if we go to queries, we can see even more clear when you expand the assets bar. You get all assets, equipment, location, loop, and system all under one. And then if you expand all assets and click on all assets, you can see all the assets within the system. So you have the building icon as the location, you have the equipment, and if you scroll down, we have loops, and then there's also system somewhere in here, I believe. Yep, right here, systems. And then we have equipment, location, loop, and system. By opening each one of these individually, you can see the different column names up top, and with each, they're all different. For example, my assets, you have the status, department, but if you go back to all assets, you only have the manufacturer, model, and location, stuff like that. Before we move on, there is also an action items that you can use to create assets. But if you are in the query section and have this open and you go to equipment, we can start by hitting new up top, or there's also you can hit new right here and do assets. But whichever way you get to making a new assets, this is the select asset record type is the window that you will see when you first initially open it. So we're going to start with making a equipment record. So this is the page that you're going to run into when you select which asset type you want to create. So with asset IDs, these are all unique, meaning that within the asset record system, meaning that you cannot have two asset records with the same asset ID. So we're just gonna name this one Demo 1. And with these asset IDs, you can have spaces, you can have dashes, you can have underscores, and other symbols. But just to make this simple, we'll just do Demo 1. And here's the rule selection. So wait a minute. Sorry, so this is the rule selection. With the BPT template, you'll get a wide range of choices from e-signature to one review, two review, being able to move the asset from inactive to active, which makes certain fields editable and uneditable in various fields. So once you create an equipment, you get to here where you can open the new record that you just created, edit the record, or create a new record or close a wizard. But we're going to open the newly created record here. So right here, we have the asset ID that we entered before, and the status we see right now is in draft. And once we move that to active, more fields will be editable. So if we edit just this right now, as you can see, we can't, in the draft phase, some of these fields are grayed out, so we can't edit them. But for criticality, with criticality, classification, display, and then there's various tabs with UDFs that is customizable dependent on the, even with BPTs, I believe there's customizable fields that you can have, but with more customized, depending on the package of RAM that you have, your screen might be different from mine. So we're just going to save this as a system element so we can demonstrate it as a system later on. And then with view, we can either assign a schedule, assign work, requests, processes, lot meter. With the equipment record, the main thing that this is missing is the hierarchy option that systems records would have, where you can set up the parent-child system record and kind of push all the child work to this to the parent record. So I'm going to save this. Okay, and then we will refresh this, and we can see demo 1 as an equipment listed here. Okay, next we're just going to do a new. I'm going to do a system this time. And then we're just going to call this system demo 1. We're going to go next. And then same thing with the rules, depending on the package that you purchase, there's be various rules available from one review, e-signature to two review. But as of right now, I'm just going to select a random one just to move on to show you guys what the setting is. And then same thing again, we're going to do open newly created record and hit finish. And again, from here, this is the system record. And from the view menu, you can see now there is a hierarchy option that wasn't available with the equipment record before. I'm going to select hierarchy, and then this is where we edit the hierarchy. So the system demo 1 is listed here as the parent system. And then when we hit this icon here, when we hit this icon, add child component, we can add all the equipments here that are possible child components. So we're just gonna add 2 of these real quick as an example. Okay, so when we have these 2 right here, we have 2 child to this 1 parent, which is called system demo 1, and we have the analog input board and the amplifier board listed as the child. And what's cool about the system record is you can add even more to the child, and I don't think there's a limit to the number of levels that you can go. So you can technically create systems within systems, and then have child to the child record, and then but it all gets pushed back to the parent record at the end. And then with this, there's also reporting that you can select, or you can view the reports for the asset audit, the system hierarchy, system select, and this is common throughout all asset records. So with equipment records, this report menu would be available as well. And as I said previously, the view menu is what differs between the asset types. For example, the system has a hierarchy and equipment doesn't. And when we go to file here, there is this one cool option where you can add similar. So if you have a similar record, or sorry, a similar equipment or a similar system, and you don't want to fill out all this information all over again, you can just select add similar, and it will copy the original record and create a new one. But of course, with a new one, you have to create a new asset ID. So this is now editable for you. So we can do system demo 2. And then this would be the second similar system that we create by using the add similar button. So now we're going to do loop. So again, if you just go to query, or if you're in my workspace, new loop, I'm going to go next, and then this will be demo loop 1. Again, we're not going to touch too much on the rules, but based on your the package of RAM you have, you should have various selection of the rules. And then we're going to open. So as you see, still asset IDs, what we set it to be, the status is in draft because we have not moved it to an active stage. And then here with loop, again, loop isn't a complete parent-child relationship. There's more of a linear relationship between all the members. So particularly with loop, when you set the loop members, you have to, when you create work for these loop members, creating it once for the loop will assign it to all of the members that are attached to the loop. And this is mostly used when one equipment calibration could affect other equipment calibrations. So if a gauge is off and that would affect the next set, then that it would be all tied together in a loop. And this is most commonly called the calibration loop among our customers, but it can be used for validation and other purposes. And the final asset record that we're going to cover is location. So if we create a new location record here, and we assign a demo location 1, just as an example, and then select whatever rule you guys want, and then we're going to open this again, and we're going to see here. So with the location, you can actually build upon what you have. So you have site A, you got building 1, 2, and 3. These are all editable and highly configurable within the RAM software. So you can even add more to this and be more specific. And this is really beneficial for GXP compliant rooms, making sure all your rooms are up to par and things like that. And then just touching on the fields a little bit, a lot of these fields, the width, length, and location of these fields are highly configurable, as I mentioned earlier, depending on the level of software that you purchased. In addition, there's also user-defined fields that we can add onto the page for you based on your needs and desires. But that mostly covers almost everything for assets. So we're gonna send it to questions for anyone with questions.
Okay, great. Before we get started going through the questions, I just wanted to announce that everything that Maui covered today is also covered in our Blue Mountain RAM e-learning. And so if your company doesn't already have a subscription to the e-learning and you would like to request a free 7-day trial, I also put that link in the chat window as well. So you can go ahead and access that if you would like to there. And then additionally, I put the certificate request link in the chat window as well. So if you'd like a certificate from today's training on assets, please go ahead and fill out that form. And again, now we're going to open up for questions. And in order to take questions, you can either raise your hand or you can type it in the questions panel. And I just want to announce the other people that we have here on the line. We have Alex, Colin, and John, all from our professional services department here, who are going to also help out with some questions. And also, I want to throw out for you guys also on the line, if you have anything else that maybe a customer didn't ask that you would like to share, or just a common question you typically see on site, please feel free to go ahead and ask that. So the first question that we have is, where is the active or inactive review, etc.?
I can answer this. This is Alex from Blue Mountain. I'm a business process analyst. So the inactive review, those are standard states in our best practice configuration. This demo was completed in just a different configuration. So the asset looks a little bit different. If you have the best practice config or our Cloud Essentials, then you would have inactive and review stages, or inactive and active stages.
Next question is, how do you add manuals or documents as links or attach them to the records?
I can answer that one actually. So if you have the equipment record and you scroll up and you open it, you can actually, from the view menu right here, you can attach links as well as link other records to the equipment or system or whatever asset record you want to link it to. But yeah, it's in the view menu.
If I could add on to that too, this is Colin from Blue Mountain. You can also, depending on how your configuration is set up, not only can you use the links grid in there, which kind of allows you to add multiple documents, embed some of those larger documents, you can utilize that links grid. But you could also, if your configuration allows for it, have an embedded document field on the record itself. And that will allow you to actually upload a document to that particular record type you're working on, so whether it's an equipment or a system. The only kind of downside of that is it's one document per field, whereas the links grid kind of allows you to embed multiple documents at once. So that's just another way of embedding the document as well.
Great, thank you. The next question is, when you are adding an asset and you're not sure that if it's part of a loop or not, can you make it part of a loop at a later date?
Yes. So when you make an equipment, for example, you have these two checkboxes, system element or loop element. If you check one of these boxes, you can add these later into either a loop or a system.
For when you're speaking of a loop asset, say one of the child equipment fails and needs replacement, that will then create an NCR for just the asset child, or will that create an NCR for all?
This is John Pingley, a business analyst here. So to answer the question, it really depends on what asset the loop, what asset the work is being done against. If you're performing the calibration against the loop and it has multiple components and that work fails, then in the NCR, it will reference the loop asset itself. However, if you're doing something particularly to an equipment or a loop member and that fails, it will reference the loop member itself. So it really depends on what level you have the schedule attached and the due date. And usually for loops, the whole purpose of the loop is to schedule and perform work to the loop itself and have that trickle down or roll down to all the components. So I would say in most examples, if a loop work fails, that NCR is against the loop, not particularly the one component that failed. So this is just something to be aware of when it comes down to traceability, is that if you are using loops, you have to use a comment field or something like that to express exactly which component failed. Otherwise, the system just sees it as a work record against the loop itself.
Thanks, John. The next question is, can you link a document to an internal drive on an internal server?
If you're referring to like a shared folder, like a shared drive, you can. I would just kind of warn that if for some reason, a folder within that drive, wherever those documents are, obviously if that moves and kind of breaks that link, you won't be able to access that document, directly from that link, I should say. But you can reference the link to wherever that location is by linking the document on the asset.
Okay, great question so far. Next we have, can the system automatically generate the asset IDs? And if so, how do you set that up to create these asset IDs automatically?
Yeah, so if you leave the asset ID field blank, it will automatically generate one for you. But I don't think, yeah, you can either asset IDs you can either enter manually or it will automatically create one for you upon generation.
That's actually a configuration choice. So Cloud Essentials, it automatically has the asset name auto generated, or rather the asset ID. You can also have that option if you'd like. If you are best practice and you may not have the option to set that up, so you would just tell Blue Mountain and we could do that for you.
All right, thank you. Next is, can I do work separately against the system versus a child?
And that kind of goes back to what I mentioned around the loop. So when you have your assets in the system, how you decide to create those as which asset type, equipment, system, loop, or location, that also allows you to determine where you perform the work. So you can decide to create a maintenance schedule on a component or a child equipment, but do the validation work to the system, the larger parent system itself. You have complete capability to define at which level the work is scheduled against and the work is performed against. So the system doesn't necessarily steer you in one direction. When you set up each asset respectively, the systems, the loops, the locations, the equipment, you determine where those events are attached, and that's what ultimately determines what the work is done against.
Thank you. Next question is, say someone has an autoclave system with multiple child assets. Can they only assign a PM to the system?
So I think it kind of goes back to what John was mentioning too, just in terms of how the scheduling to work. The scheduling functionality, you're able to have a schedule for the system itself. We were kind of talking about this earlier with the loop. You can have a schedule set up on the system record that kind of encompasses that system as a whole. But within that system, there's individual child components, whether they be equipment or other systems. You can also have a schedule set up that has an event associated with that particular child component. So like John said before, you're kind of able to pick and choose which assets you'd want to have the work done to. You can either kind of treat the system as a whole, or you can individually choose components to have work done against based on their schedule and the associated event with that schedule.
Thank you. Okay, now this next question is a little complicated and a long scenario, so I'm going to read it, and if anyone needs me to repeat it, I can do so. So they're asking that, would an asset such as an HPLC or GC be considered a system or a loop? Meaning there are multiple components with individual assets entered in Blue Mountain RAM because of distinct serial numbers as part of the one overall system. For instance, HPLC1 is the overall asset ID, but within RAM it is broken down as HPLC1 pump, HPLC1 detector, etc. They are all calibrated individually, but as one overall calibration. And all of the components would have the same overall calibration due date. So would you recommend putting it in as a system or a loop?
I can take this one. So this is a good question, and it really does come down to analyzing what the best option is for each system or loop or each device you're entering into the system. One big thing to notice here is how the differences between assets and what those differences mean in terms of work relations. So the system record, when it has multiple children underneath it, and you perform work to the children, that will roll up and be visible from the parent system itself. The loop, in retrospect, actually has work done to the loop level, and that work gets copied down to all of the components. So with the system, work is rolling up to the top level. With the loop, it actually pushes down to the bottom level. So depending on which asset type you enter it as, you're going to get different relationships with work there. So you'd want to ask yourself, if I enter this as an HPLC, do I expect the individual equipment that are attached? Do I expect anything done particularly to those equipment to roll up to the HPLC level and be able to see all of that holistically? Or am I going to always perform my work against the larger HPLC and expect that one cal work to copy down to all the components, which would be the loop example? So that's really what needs to be considered, is how do I want the work to push up or roll down, and how am I performing work? And you also have to ask the question, back to my previous answer about traceability. If one of these equipment records that are attached to this HPLC fail, do I want to have a failing work record pushed down to all the equipment? Because that's what the loop would do. It treats the whole thing as one entity with one work. And if that work fails, all components fail. So if it's more of a scenario of during the calibration, one instrument failed and you just want to replace that but not fail the whole HPLC, then that's probably more of the system equipment relationship than the loop equipment relationship. So those are just some examples of kind of what should be going through your mind as you're adding records and what type of asset they need to be. And another thing to point out here is that once you create a record as a certain asset type, there is no way in RAM to change that. So I can't change a loop to a system or an equipment to a loop. You would have to actually retire and delete or archive that record and recreate another one as the correct record type to represent it if it was created incorrectly.
Great, thank you, John. Next question is, if they add a calibration work to a system and it moves to in progress, will all of the children move out of active to in progress as well, or do the children remain as active assets?
So in terms of how the work is done, again, it depends on which asset you're actually performing the work against. If you're doing work against the actual system asset itself, then the system will, I believe maybe the wording that you're looking for is work in progress. I know if you're using the best practices, whenever there's an open work order against a particular asset, your status will change from the active status on the asset to actually work in progress. Just to kind of let you know that there is a work order against that asset. You probably shouldn't touch it or manipulate the data in any way. Again, that also goes for the components that if there is a work order against them as well. So if you're actually doing work against the child component, then that child component, again, will be in the work in progress state if there is open work against it. So it really depends on where the work's actually being done against that ultimately determines that status. Now, whenever the work order, again, just to kind of talk about the statuses, the work order itself, if you're using the best practices template, typically transitions from open to in progress. So in progress is where the work is actually being done. Work in progress, which is an asset state on the asset record, kind of coincides with those open orders as well.
And Colin, just to clarify, they just wrote in and said that they were speaking of doing work on the system only in this scenario.
So for the system only, I believe it would be just the work in progress on the system, since that's where the work record is associated with. You're referencing that system as the asset that the work's being done against. So that system asset would be the one that's in work in progress.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see. So far, I believe that's all. Oh, we have a hand raised, but it looks like this hand raise has been up for a little while, and that same person has been asking some questions in the panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put your hand down, and then if you still have a question that you'd like to ask out loud, please feel free to raise it again, and then I can unmute your line. But I don't want to unmute you if we had already answered your question. Oh, okay, let's see here. Back to hand raised, so I'm going to click to unmute you. Hi, Marco. Are you there?
Question was answered already. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, so I think that those are all the questions we have right now. We'll stay on the line for a few more minutes in case anyone else thinks of anything. But in the meantime, again, I just want to point you over to the chat panel where you can see a lot of URLs. We have some for both the customer lab and booth registrations, summit information, e-learning trial, and a certificate request form for today's training. And so otherwise, we're just going to hang on the line here for a few more minutes, and if any questions come in, we'll take them. Someone just wrote in and asked if they could get a copy of today's presentation. We can provide you with a copy of that if you just email marketing@coolblue.com. I know you said that you had arrived late, so you missed part of it, so we can definitely get that for you. But again, just send an email to marketing@coolblue.com. All right, I believe that is all the questions we have then for today. But again, we want to thank everyone for attending our customer booth, and a reminder that our next event will be our customer lab on June 3rd on NCRs or non-conformance records. So we'd like to invite all of you to that, and we hope to see you there. But otherwise, we just want to say thank you, and we hope to see you at our next event. Have a great day.